Project 170, we actually have Quiterock up on the wall here. This is one of our parting walls, other one over here. This is our first layer of gyp. This is a Quiterock product, that's the actual brand name, but what it does is it actually has a special core to help absorb sound transmission. You guys remember when this wall was framed, we had mineral wool insulation, then we had resilient channel on isolation clips, and this is our first layer. And then over here, you can actually see our second layer being installed. So first layer is this Quiterock, second layer is this blue board. And this green stuff right here, this is actually called green glue. It's an acoustical noise proofing compound. And you essentially use one tube for the entire sheet before you put this blue board up. So in between our Quiterock and blue board. You can also see the guys are doing a really good job making sure that they get the vertical to horizontal surface filled with acoustical sealant. You're basically helping trap any of that noise that is absorbed by this panel. It's basically being dispersed into this more elastic type material, which is this green glue. So we're doing the same thing at the very top, a timber ceiling in this place. And that timber ceiling is irregular. So it's really important that at the top of this wall where this Quiterock hits that timber ceiling, if you look really closely, you'll see that green line, and that's all been filled with that acoustical glue, further trapping any noise from making its way through that ceiling, because that's a weak point in this otherwise really soundproof wall. Back here, we have this TV recess. So the client actually logged into their daily log and saw this installed and quickly emailed us and was like, hey guys, this was an oversight on our part, or my part, and it wasn't something that we really considered, but this right here, we don't have the same soundproofing behind the television, which a television is going to make noise. There's a speaker on it. So one of the concerns is that this is a weak point in this otherwise really soundproof wall. So we've kind of stopped and hit the brakes, and how can we achieve what we're looking for here? And now, in my mind, there's a couple of really important things here. You need solid blocking. This is a big articulating TV mount, so there's a lot of leverage when the TV's way out here. You need something solid for that bracket to attach to. And that's why if you look through this Myrex, you can actually see solid blocking right here. That also doesn't attribute to really good soundproofing quality. So we're talking about using a mass-loaded vinyl and really just creating some separation, and then obviously our Quiterock on top of that. But right now this is up in question as to whether we get rid of the niche entirely. And if we do that, that's fine. We can plane out with the rest of the wall and have the TV mounted on the face of the wall. But we still need that solid blocking, which that horizontal resilient channel isn't really going to do a great job at being solid blocking. We still have to span across at least two of those horizontals with some solid plywood. I just wanted to kind of fill you guys in with what we're dealing with right now, as far as what some of the details that we run into and how we're approaching them in the field live and so on and so forth. Important to know, we're only using the Quiterock on the parting walls between the homes. And the rest of the walls, this is just getting a single layer of blue board. So we're using a 1/2-inch blue board, and then this will, again, all get a veneer plaster throughout the entire space. Awesome skylights pouring down natural light down the big walls, especially being close to 18 feet tall. We want that light to pour down and not catch waviness in the wall. So that's why the guys have spent an enormous amount of time making sure we get a flat wall, and then now we're going into the multiple layers of gyp. You actually see with the guys in the corner here, they're applying the green glue. We're using a lot of it. The intention is that you're separating that blue board, like rubber separation between the two layers. That second layer needs to be installed actually within 15 minutes. Additional good practice would be staggering the joints. I'm always impressed when these guys run these guns. I could never switch screws that quickly. Brian's got our 3D scan open, and as they're boarding, he's paying attention to anywhere we've had a whip open. Basically going through this, and just as they're putting board up, they're making sure that any of the whips that we left in the wall aren't being buried. It happens on every job, but having this 3D scan kind of allows us to walk through this live and catch it before it's too far. And should we forget something later on, we can always open up a wall, but to do this now is a lot easier than if the wall is finished. So that's exactly why we scanned this place. And now we're in Beacon Hill. So painters are wrapped up. So the scope with the paint here is a little different. We're not doing any walls. Everything in this place is being wallpapered. So what we did is we came in, we've already talked about how we've built up some of the ceilings down to meet our crown molding, so we're not following the, the discrepancies in an imperfect ceiling. So the painters started with that, got the ceiling painted, and then they taped everything off and then painted all of our trim. So all of our trim has been sprayed. It's a much smoother finish. It is a more traditional home, but we wanted to kind of, rather than having a brush finish, we wanted that consistent, really flat looking, not so much as a sheen, but as a finish, rather than having the brush strokes. So again, very tight site. You can see in here, pocket door here, the Kukin Brothers molding. We have our pocket door. We were just actually talking with Patrick and James about this, about getting this hardware. We're actually using M-Tech modern rectangular pull on this. Looking back, this is actually something we maybe missed, and it's happened before, is that our reveals are really, really tight. So, realistically, this is, probably just a little less than a 16. But you can see if that went in, it's gonna rub. And if it doesn't rub, it has a potential to rub in the future. So what we decided is that we're actually gonna take a router and router out this shape, so this rectangle, and router out that entire shape. So when this goes in, it'll actually sit completely flush across there. So that, we've dealt with this in warranty in the past, that, oftentimes something will catch on an edge. So I think this is something going forward that we really want to pay attention to, is eliminating any edges along here with any hardware, so there isn't ever a potential for this to catch an edge being pushed in or being pulled out. And one thing we also just recently changed is, this is a bump open, but soft close, but we're not doing a soft open. And the reason that we've kind of stopped doing the soft open is because pulling it out of the pocket when it has a soft open mechanism, you're basically undoing that actuator that creates that soft open movement. So we've been eliminating it inside the pocket, but keeping it here, because most of the time people aren't whipping this thing open, slamming into the wall. It's usually when you close it that you want to close it, walk away, and let that softly hit the wall. So that's something we changed. This is actually from HD Pocket Doors, as the kit for this one. Kitchen's all covered up right now, just because painters were in here. Really, next step for us is getting wallpaper installed. So like I said, this whole place is getting wallpapered. We've talked about the hidden doors a number of times. All of the hidden doors will be wallpapered. The only place that won't be wallpapered is the bathroom, which is painted. And then that entryway where we've created this barrel cloud type ceiling. So that'll all be painted, because there is no start and stop point. So we'll have this, this termination from entryway to otherwise wallpaper. We still got this beam that we're gonna paint. We've talked about a faux finish, giving it this like blackened steel look. So the RAS, this is what James has been using for all his scribing. Nice thing, didn't know that. Look at that. I'm learning, so you spin the handle, you can move the dust guard. I can feel my face blushing that I didn't know that. Yeah, I've never used this. But it's what we're using to scribe our baseboard. And this baseboard is actually for our window bench, something that was added in this project. And I want to walk you through real quick what we decided and kind of what we're looking at. Originally, it was just going to be this utilitarian lift up bench top that was just going to house extra pillows, blankets, and just using the floor as the catch. We decided against that. We took the kitchen style shaker doors. We've added 3 shaker drawer fronts here, and then a solid top. The solid top, they're working on scribing and getting that fit. You can see the yellow tape kind of outlining, as they're fitting that scribe more and more. And then this will get a cushion on top for a great daybed. I mean, sitting here, reading a great book, looking over Star Drive, there's nothing better. Maybe a coffee cup on top of that nice white painted window stool. Another thing, we've talked about this in the bedroom as well, is that we actually decided to make it smaller than the opening. Rather than scribing it to fit, it gives it this furniture style look, so it's not slammed up tight against the wall. However, contrary to that, the top is actually scribed tight, because if you have this small gap, things are gonna roll off. It's gonna look as though it wasn't fit right. So we kind of play the game of top scribe fit tight to the walls, but the bottom has this, kind of reveal, and it's tucked in. But you can actually see, if you look past there is a filler just 6 inches back, so nothing can get really lost back there. I'm curious of what you guys think. Comment below, let us know if you think this is like a cool look where it's not scribe tight and it's more of a furniture look. And what that base is actually the kick that will go under here So you have that look of 2 legs, but you do have the kick to prevent anything from getting underneath. Now the drawers, in the center here, we have a nice deep drawer because we have the ability to have a deep drawer. On these, you don't really have the ability to go this deep. You only have the ability to go as deep as the short side. So what we've done, check that out. So the drawer is actually longer on the middle section than it is here. Now, what that means is we've gained a couple cubic inches, because that's what we're dealing with in this job, of additional storage. But what we have to do is we actually have to use a short slide and a long slide. And the long slide will never be extended all the way out because you're limited by the short slide. So it gains you a little bit of additional depth and storage, but it still has the operation, and you can actually see it here at the bottom side, top, and that will go into that cavity there. And that's really what it came down to, is that they wanted as much storage as possible, so we're maximizing that back angle. We weren't able to get the extreme angle of the wall, but we were able to get, you know, as much as you see in that. What I didn't mention is actually this wall and one of the walls in the primary bedroom were actually replastered yesterday. And if you guys remember way back to when we started this job, we left some of the existing walls. Well, we're paying for that now. These were existing plaster walls that we had kind of cut up and patched, and looking back, that's something that we probably would reconsider going forward. I know we're gonna reconsider going forward because we dealt with a handful of spider cracks, and before we wallpaper, which is our next step, we have to make sure we address those. So Diego and his team came back out, we replastered that wall. They actually installed a mesh for reinforcement as well as a bonding agent, and now we're ready for wallpaper. So last week we were doing this straight edge. You guys, we talked about it. They did a 2-coat plaster on this wall. We haven't plastered this yet, but you can start to see really how this light is going to shine down at different times of the day. We're here a little bit later than last week. But I also want to talk about a detail. And this is actually a heat release for our fireplace. It is not done, so work in progress. I'll warn you guys. You can see a lot of the spray foam and some of that framing up there, which we need to address. The goal is to have this to be trimless. It was a detail that frankly wasn't incredibly well thought out, and I think it was, everyone kind of had an idea, and it wasn't something that we went through and actually sketched through and worked together and worked through it. We did that today, and what we're going to do is actually bore the inside of this, and this will all get plastered. I'm going to actually use this reference point that these guys made a really nice straight line for this ceiling, and take that reference point over, and it's going to hit, I'm sorry, here, and it's going to hit the top portion, and then we're going to actually encapsulate all of the framing behind here above the fireplace, so any heat that comes out of this fireplace makes its way into an encapsulated cavity and then out this heat release. This right here is actually a bookcase that we've built in the shop. We actually have some low voltage as well as a gas shutoff for our fireplace back here. So I want to actually make sure with Ken, I'm fairly certain that he has, but they've actually created an access panel to make sure that we can access this. Obviously got to clean this up, but we'll have a shutoff back there. We'll probably take this low voltage, Doug, and mount it somewhere in the same vicinity as that gas shutoff, so we can reach in the back of that bookcase and have access to that should we need to service this. This is actually going to get plastered at the very end. This is a lime plaster, so it will be an exposed plaster. But you can see, you know, they're doing surface by surface. Obviously working on the left side of this door here, getting that all straight edged out. But you can see the gambrel wall is done down to the vertical portion. And if you look closely, there's a blue chalk line across there, and they're snapping that so they can have a really tight point where that wall goes from angled to vertical. Again, you know, we're gonna hit our windowsill to make sure it hits that line perfectly. But by doing one surface at a time, you're never working with what I like to call, and I don't know if this is industry correct, but a wet corner. So you're not working with 2 walls adjacent or side by side with a corner that's wet and you're trying to flatten both at the same time. You're doing one surface, letting it cure. You know, essentially if you were to do these 2 and then you could come back and do the other 2, you're working off a dry corner. So if you have to work off a straight edge similar to what he's doing there, you have a nice straight dry edge to work off of. See that point there? You can blue chalk line up top, and everything coming to that point. It was really, something that we talked about early on is, everything kind of comes up to a single point and give it a nice transition to go up to the ceiling and then into this door. And here, you can actually see one of the skylights plastered. It is only base coated, so we got one more coat on the finish on the opposite. You can see these two sides here are actually finished. Just like I was saying, they're doing opposing sides, letting that cure, and then doing the other. But now you're getting really that true frameless look of that skylight. There is no frame. You're just looking from painted plaster straight up to the blue sky. I said last week it was gloomy, so it was hard to see. Today it's nice and blue. Guys, thank you for tuning in to another site visit. Make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, follow us on all the Instagram channels. Stay tuned for tomorrow for another episode of Revealed. We're actually going to get back into the NS Builders podcast after a short sabbatical. So what my surprise is actually Ken is out in the shop and he's filming one of his courses. And if you guys haven't already checked this out, check out MT Copeland. They have a complete cabinet making course, and he's doing version 2 or the second edition of that. So we're gonna sneak out in the shop and just see what they're doing. Oh, I'm right in camera. Can I come in? I was just giving a little sneak peek. I was gonna give, damn, there's so many people here again.
How's it going?
Good, how are you guys?